Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the Secrets of Master Astrologers Summit. I'm Suzanne Gerber, your host for this incredible 3-week cosmic journey starring some of the most wonderful astrologers out there. I am so happy to be presenting today's guest speaker, Linda Kubota Byrd. Linda has been a practicing astrologer and personal growth consultant for more than 25 years, which is impressive all by itself. But she's so much more than that. As a consciousness awakening coach, Linda draws on her background in evolutionary, experiential, and transformational astrology, and often uses EFT, NLP, heart-assisted therapy, and Stargate inner child work to bring awareness and healing to her international clientele. Linda is kind of an astrologer's astrologer. She's a member of all of the professional organization. She's a guide and regular lecturer for the Astrology Hub. She has presented at Frank Clifford's London School of Astrology and has been on the faculty of Stormy Grace's YouTube Academy. Incidentally, both Frank and Stormy are also guests on this summit. Currently, Linda works with the Mountain Astrologer magazine. She's the president of the Sacramento chapter of the NCGR and often live streams with the Stargate Experience Academy. And somehow she's managed to find time to share her wisdom with us. Today, Linda is going to talk about some of the most exciting and powerful ways, she thinks, to work with astrology in a talk she's calling Conscious Awakening with Help from the Planets. I love that title. And right now, it is my huge honor to introduce you to Linda Kubota Byrd. It is so great to have you on the show, Linda.
Thank you, Suzanne. It's a great honor to be invited, so I greatly appreciate that.
Well, before you tell us some of these ways that we can wake up with the help of the planets, I'm just so fascinated, as I'm sure so many other people are, all these different trainings and experiences that you have working with all these different modalities. How did you get interested in them? What came first? How, I know it's a lot to ask in one question, but how do you integrate them together in your client work?
Well, first of all, I have a Gemini North Node, so I love learning. So astrology is like the perfect thing to do because there's always more to learn. And I started out my adult life as a dental hygienist. And I remember the director of our program saying, to be a professional person, you must remain a continuing student. And that just really stuck with me. And because I love learning anyway, I'm drawn to so many different things. And I do think it's really helpful as astrologers to learn other modalities as well, because otherwise we can get kind of tunnel vision and think that it's just about astrology. But there are many other modalities that support and interconnect with what the chart tells us so that we can actually help the client. I mean, before it was just, awareness is the first step, and it's immensely important. But since I've added the energy psychology and these other pieces, it's been so rewarding to actually move the energy or move the blockage that's showing up in the chart at that time. So and I think everybody, and so many people I know are studying other things. I've also studied Reiki when I lived in Austin, and just other kinds of modalities. And I think it's important or helpful to integrate those things into our practices when they feel called for, when it's appropriate. So, yeah.
And do they tend to come up, or maybe not with a first time session with somebody, but as you start to work with them more, do you bring it in, or is it kind of spontaneous for you? Do you get?
Well, it depends. As you know, every consultation is going to be different depending on the client. But I do have a formula. My passion, the part that I feel that I can offer that is most important to a client is for them to understand themselves and understand their default settings. So I go through a basic part if they're new, or even if they're not. It's surprising how that people have holes in their basics. And so I just kind of go through them really quickly. I personally like to include the client in my work. As the president of NCGR in Sacramento, our mission is to be ambassadors for astrology. And so I find that if I kind of tell them what I'm looking at and take the cues off of them as to how interested they are, as to how deep I go into it, but I give them a basic structure to work with. And then as they're speaking, my typical sessions are 2 hours because
Wow.
I like to spend time going through. If there's an issue going on, then I do usually get to some energy psychology, totally depending on the client. I have an intake form. And so I ask them if they'd be interested in that to see if they want to or not. And 99.9% say yes.
I'm
So
sure.
yeah, and so as we're talking, I just take notes on the back of their chart, and I create like a menu to see what's most important, or what belief system do they have running that's holding them back at this point. And then at the end, we just kind of decide what we want to work with for this particular session. And then I kind of listen to see what modality would be the most appropriate for that person. And then, yeah, but I admit it's not me that's making these decisions. Before I work with any client, I always pray ahead of time to get out of the way, let the highest good come through. So it's just intuition helps a lot, or just the other voice.
No, I'm right there with you. In fact, what we've shared in our exchanges is just how much you integrate other, not just healing modalities, but just ways of being in the world, and kind of a really balancing the left brain, rational, analytical thing that is so much of the history of astrology comes from a almost academic approach to it. But you've talked about, and just seeing you, just the beautiful setting you're in, you can just feel that right brain, that much more yin energy. And how do you bring that in? How do you accomplish that balancing? Because you can't do it from a left brain place. So how does that work?
Right. Like I said, I like for people to really get astrology, but not just through their left brain and memorization, but to feel it. I have a stellium in Pisces, so it's all about feelings, right? And so if I'm teaching, or even when I'm working with a client, I like to use analogies just to kind of help people. So when I'm talking about their chart and how they're wired, I talk about how that they have like their personal software program that was inserted when they were born. And so they have a program that they've been given, and the chart shows us what that program's about. And so it's helpful to be able to show people what their default settings are, because most people go through life in default and don't even notice, really. It's just how they are. But when they become conscious of the default pattern, then they can be a choice, and to choose to use the higher octave of that energy, as opposed to having it operate unconsciously, which oftentimes comes through in a more of a reactive way. And so I use analogies with the person in general. If I'm working with, if I'm teaching in class, I can use music just to get the flavor or the energy of things. I use style, personal style, for the ascendant, which is really fun. I worked with this group called the Aspire Foundation for 10 years. I was a volunteer, and we would break people into different their elements for their ascendant. And it's fascinating because we would break into groups. And so like the earth ascendants would be dressed very casually, comfortably, right? Comfort is so important. And the air people would be, I remember one time we were all lined up and we all had our legs crossed exactly the same way. And we make sure that, everything is matches, or at least it kind of goes together. And yeah, and then the fire people are, in bright colors and so forth. And so it's interesting when you teach to use that kind of approach to kind of, again, give people a sense of the energy, not just to read descriptions. So yeah,
No, I love that. And that, I mean, that alone would just be so much fun.
it's fun. I mean, it's just, and it's, I think that the body remembers, or the kinesthetic, through kinesiology and the kinesthetics, we retain more at a deeper level than just remembering, you know, at
Right.
least
It's why
that's how I feel.
we could sing 10,000 songs, but if you asked us to quote back something that we read yesterday, it might be a little more challenging because we don't have that associative or emotional component to it.
Right, right. And to help people kind of see that we're a combination of these different energies. I always kind of look at a chart and I say, this is like energy soup. It's a combination and it's unique to you. And so just because in the way we start astrology is we've got all these different descriptions for the different things, and they don't, oftentimes they don't match. And then it gets confusing, and a lot of people get discouraged because there's so much to learn. And so I like to get them more, all their whole body involved in it, and so they can feel it on a different level, and know from a deeper place, I guess you could say.
I love that.
Yeah.
I'm writing some of this down so we can share this with people.
Yeah.
So I want to jump back, even though we're saying we don't want to get too academic, even though of course that is important. These are the building blocks. We need to learn this stuff so that we can integrate it and then just let it be natural. But I'm sure a lot of people that, regardless of their own level of astrological knowledge, are probably wondering, well, what are those default settings? How do I find them? And I just thought it might be interesting for you right now. Obviously, this is a huge topic. You could do entire courses on this. But if you were to simplify it, what would you guide people to begin to look at their own chart to capture not just personality stuff and tendencies, which that's probably a little easier for folks, but how to find those default settings?
Well, I think just in general, I mean, the rising sign or the ascendant is, even if you just know the element, there's just a ton of information in there as to how we want to be perceived. And so it's just our automatic part of it. And the part that I feel is valuable for people is to understand where it came from. It's like the role we play in our family, and it's what we came in to learn. It's not who we are.
Mm.
And so understanding, because I have so many people who say, I don't want to wear a mask anymore. There's this longing for authenticity. And so when you could kind of show them where this came from, I mean, if they have Taurus rising, they were a helper. That's how they were valued in the family. And so it's just helping people to see that this is where it came from, but you don't have to do that anymore to survive. You're really, really good at it, but you don't have to do that to be accepted in the world. And so it's just, even things like a Earth rising who goes to a party where they don't know anybody, so that I always say, do you ask, is there anything I can do to help? Because that's their role, you know? Yeah. Or water risings, that they're reluctant to really go to things they don't really, know people, and how they kind of stay on the margins of the room, just reading energy and just helping them to understand that, yes, this is in the chart. This is what you came in to learn, or this is what you chose. And so that they can not feel awkward about it, to say, this is, you came in to learn to read energy. And, that kind of thing. Typically it came from a chaotic childhood, blah, blah, blah. And so you just kind of work with them in that way. And things like the moon what we do, our automatic reactive behavior, when we're overwhelmed. I like to tell the different moons, even just by energy, like fire moons oftentimes have tempers. The energy comes in and it's got to be expressed, and they could have, that could be the only fire in their chart. They could be, they could have Pisces rising, but they've got this part that comes out, it's just helpful for them to kind of, oh, that's why I do that, and so instead of letting things build up, they can maybe bleed it off before it gets to that point. Or, when an air moon's obsessing, they've got the thing going round and round, going this and that, and just like, okay, because the moon also keeps us from our deeper feelings. It's like our defense from dropping into deeper feelings. And so it's helpful for them to understand their reactivity or their automatic behavior, the default, so that they can, when they go into that reactive behavior, they could say, okay, there's something else going on here. I mean, I'm obsessing over something, and it's really, there's something beneath that. So
I love this, and I would love to get you to expound a little bit more. You're talking about the moon. We think of the moon as the seat of our emotions, but you're saying that often the moon can be almost like a filter, like something that keeps you from getting to the essence of it, because it's like the first wave of reaction. And you
right.
described some general fiery qualities, some air, and that people sitting out there with earth and water moons are going to be like, well, what about us? Will you have a word for them?
Yeah, and even when I'm working with a client, sometimes I'll spend about the 4 different reactive behaviors, so people can understand other people better. It's just, I think that's the gift of astrology, is not only to learn about ourselves, but why other people are different from us. So the earth moons will get busy. If they're Virgo, they'll start cleaning their bathroom with a tile with a toothbrush, or they're polishing their car for the 3rd time this week. It's just staying busy, busy, busy. Maybe this feeling will go away. A Taurus moon will book a massage, go out and get some good food, maybe some wine. It's just that we all have our own particular style, but the general earth people will get busy in some way, physically busy. And then the water moons, I have a Pisces moon, so I'll admit to this one, we get our feelings hurt very easily, and we'll make a big deal out of it, and we cry typically, or we go off by ourselves and feel sorry for ourselves. The victim comes out, Pisces moon martyr victim comes out, poor me, and it's like, and this, it took me a long time to really get, because it's like, I do feel, I overfeel, but it's emotions. It's not the feeling. The feeling is underneath the emotion. And so it's really helpful to kind of go, well, look at me indulging myself. And so what's really going on here? And so when you're with astrology friends, you could say, or people you're close to, and they're acting obsessive in some way, you could say, okay, so is there something going on? Do you want to talk about? And you could kind of help people get to the source of what they're trying to avoid, because most people they don't like to go to feelings, because it eventually leads to love, which leads to pain. And who wants to go there? Or it's usually connected to some childhood wound. So it's just kind of helping people to get to the source of what the issue is, so that the trigger doesn't keep getting pushed, Yeah.
Yeah. And, I'm going to tie this back to what you were saying right at the beginning, when you said you can find the higher octave of something to find a positive expression. So assuming that a lot of people have been doing their psychological work, their spiritual work, their evolutionary work, and maybe they're not in knee-jerk reaction mode. They really are. They might have it for a moment, and then they might do some cognitive behavioral work on themselves and go, wait a minute, what is this really about? What is the higher octave of the four elements for the moon, just in a couple a couple words each.
Each, well, for fire is instead of being reactive and, overly, it's just to become more inspiring, to be more, to choose where they want to spend their energy, what they want to be passionate about, that kind of thing, instead of kind of letting the unconscious kind of drive them. And the earth people, instead of just being, kind of just drudgery doing work, to be able to see what inspires them. What do they want to do with their gift of being able to be organized and grounded and do things, in a positive way. And a lot of these things, I think as we get older and we have more time on our hands, we can use our gifts in service, to do volunteer work and things like that. And air people, obviously it's, using your mind. And so it's just, instead of just doing things just to feed the mind, to choose things that feeds them the wholeness of who they are, not just their mind. What is their soul asking from them, in a sense? Where are they feeling drawn to learn about something more? And then water people, to not be, I don't cry like I used to. Well, for one thing, I attracted a partner who says, "You're not going to guilt me on this," and he doesn't really react to my crying. Because we bring in people who help us, and so yeah, not going to guilt me on this is a big one. Because as Pisces, that was very much how I was raised. And so it teaches me to not do those default things anymore, and to become more compassionate and more empathetic, and to be not, it's all about me, poor me, you hurt me, but just to look and see, what is the bigger picture here, and so forth. So it wasn't exactly, I don't know if that's what you're looking for, but that's what came in.
It's very nice and imagistic, that we can see, because I think this is something that is so important to both of us and so many other people, is catching the shadow, recognizing it, bringing it into awareness, not being embarrassed or shamed. I mean, to think, oh, well, I'm the one with the shadow. Everybody else has got it all together. It's our humanness, but then what, right? And how do we go about, you can't outrun it, but we can transmute it. And that's what you're talking about, right?
Right. And I think one of the ways that's like a shortcut to seeing our shadow is to look at our judgments.
Oh,
and who do we judge? So in my workshops, oftentimes I'll say, what kind of people really bug you? And that's it. People can usually come up with that. And so I'd say, like mine, I was like, I don't like loud, brashy women, that kind of. And then I said, and I'm an Aries. I'm a 0 Aries. So does that give you a clue on what part of myself I hadn't accepted? Kind of this Ariesness in me that was not, it was not exactly an acceptable thing for a little, Japanese girl to be an Aries. It's almost like an oxymoron. And so I learned that it was not blatant, but just energetically you pick up, like I say, Pisces, showing in Pisces, but you pick up that something's wrong with you, because I was overactive, I was masculine, I was a tomboy, and so you see that part of yourself that you've kind of shoved away and shoved into the shadow, that can come out not in the most lovely way, and you project it onto other people. We say that person's so this, and that person's so bossy, and that person's so loud, and so forth. And when we own it and kind of go, there's a part of me that's my son, and it doesn't have to look like that. I could choose to use it at a higher octave. And so I think that's a really good shortcut to see where is our shadow, because we're all mirrors for one another, right?
Yeah, well, 100%. And probably no one more than our family, right? Are usually, we're still talking to them. our parents or the people who we identify as parents, of course, our children, and then
Mhm.
partner, right? Partner who just can bring up things like nobody else.
Right, right. That's your job.
You're the mirror. Um,
Yeah.
so, and what about, because there's people that are very open to this and they're like, I'm going to do that. I'm going to catch my judgments in action. And then there are people that are still, kind of guarded around that, still defensive, and they'll go, but that is annoying. I mean, doesn't that bother you? It's not me, and they can't quite bridge that gap. What do you have to say about that?
Well, something, and I usually bring this up whenever I'm doing any interview or something, is something called the responsibility prayer, and it's from the Course in Miracles. I don't know if you've ever heard it, but this particular thing. I learned it in the workshops I was doing, but this changed my life. It's like I'm responsible for all of it, not me, Linda, me, but my higher self will create whatever it is, my next lesson, you could say. But so I bring in things that will teach me that, oh, this is something my next step in my evolution of learning. So that if somebody is, I mean, it's hard sometimes. There are things that people cannot accept as that they created it, and it's understandable. Horrific things have happened to people. So you have to step lightly with this, but there are times when you could gently, especially as you work with clients, gently say, okay, so what part of you, or what did you gain from that situation? Because I mean, we all carry these stories from our childhood that, this happened to me, poor me. And it's kind of like, okay, so what did you gain from that? And there's always something, and it's like, so what if, there's a part of you, your higher self, called that in so that you could learn from it, and that you reframe. This is one thing I love to do, is to reframe the childhood stories to help people see that they are not victims, that these were gifts in a sense, and that they are who they are because of those things. And so, yeah, it's a touchy area, and you have to feel it out to see who's ready and who's not, you know.
Yeah,
But
especially as you alluded to, um, there's serious trauma that people experience, capital T trauma, and
absolutely.
then we all have something, small t trauma.
Hmm.
But the people that have really, the horrific kind of stuff, that takes a lot of work, doesn't it, for them to really, because, you know, and there's no, we're not blaming, you never blame the victim. It isn't that at all, but people do get kind of adapted to that part of their identity. Like it is them, right? And if they didn't have that anymore, well, who do they get to
Right.
be? And that can be the most liberating, exciting thing for some people, and for other people, it's like, like the example of prisoners who've been in for a long time and they get freed and they don't know what to do. That freedom is uncomfortable and overwhelming.
Right, right. And I think right now with Scorpio South Node, I think that this is a big opportunity to do this trauma work. And there's quite a bit of trauma work that's being offered online. I'm getting all kinds of emails. There's trauma conferences, trauma, and it's not just trauma from this lifetime. It's trauma from our genetics. It's the
Yeah.
epigenetics that we've inherited. So when you brought up the prisoner thing, that reminded me where so many people who are imprisoned come from. There's something that came into through their lineage that is part of that whole thing. And so when you heal, it's like you have to go back and heal that part too. And so I do think that that's what we're being asked for right now with the South Node in Scorpio, is to really go into not only our own personal history, but the history of our ancestors in a sense. Yeah, yeah. It's a big subject, but there's just a lot of support for it right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you talk about the nodes being in along the Scorpio and Taurus axis, and you say it's a time that is rich for it. How can individual people, whether or not they have anything in Taurus and Scorpio, how can they like tap into the timeliness, the richness of this opportunity? What can we do in real life to avail ourselves of it?
Yeah, well, it's in the zeitgeist, right? So is it because it's that's what where the nodes are, and so it's going to hit whatever some part of your chart in some way, and so yeah, so it's just kind of it's like you look at the transits, the progressions, and so forth, and you kind of see what's ripe, you know, what's ready to be released, what part of the chart is getting highlighted that it's saying, okay, this is pointing at something. I also use Huber, and I don't know if you're familiar with the Huber system, but it'll show you at what age, what trauma happened. And so when things hit an aspect to that time, then you kind of say, okay, here's something there, this area is ready for release. Yeah. And it's getting to back to when you were talking about how we're identified with our victim. It reminds me of Byron Katie. And I think this is the thing that went on when Sag was in the South Node last year, was looking at our beliefs, you know? And so it's like, is that true? I mean, we just do things because we think it's true, but if you stop and say, is that true?
Yeah.
You know, and are you absolutely certain that's true? Where did that thought come from? And then who would I be without that belief? That's simple yet profound.
So profound.
You know, it's like, oh my gosh, you know, but when you can help people to kind of get through those things, to not be identified with that victim part of themselves, it's liberation time. You know, it's like that they're now free. Same with the responsibility prayer. You know, it's like something could push your button, but ultimately it's our choice. If we go with this, I created this situation. If I think about it, not me, but my higher self, and I could either react and get hurt or mad or whatever it is, but no one can make me be mad. It's my choice. They could push every button they can, but ultimately I can decide if I want to be mad or not. And that is huge, to be given this opportunity to see. It's kind of like the observer role. You can kind of see your life from a different place and you say, wow, you know, I sure don't know why I created this. It really stinks. I hate it. But there's a part of me that knows that there's a gift in here somewhere. And oftentimes you won't see it right then, but a year, 2 years, maybe 10 years later, you'll look back and go, wow, thank goodness that happened, even though it was horrible. But something greater than me put me through that so that I can grow, you know? Yeah.
I think this is the crux of it all right here, what you've been talking about. And we can invite people to just really consider this for themselves. The whole chart seems to, there's a million ways, approaches, styles, subtleties, you know, lineages, house systems. I mean, there's so many different ways to slice it and dice it. But I think it really comes down to this. Are you the hero of your life in your chart? And is that going to be your attitude? And can you just take responsibility, which doesn't mean you caught, and that doesn't mean the ego in this lifetime caused it, but there's something in your wholeness that has taken this on, has chosen this, and that this is going to be, you could see it all as this terrible, horrible thing that happened to you, or the most exciting possible thing, and you're going to choose to live that way. And then I think with that inner shift, the whole chart changes, the whole approach changes. That's what you're saying?
Absolutely. Yes. Because when you can see, it's like becoming the observer of your life. It's like looking at your chart and saying, this is my experience. This is what I chose for this particular experience. And that when things happen, then you can kind of, as an astrologer, you can see when people come in and they tell you about a story, and you can see it's right here. You see it in the chart, so it's not random. And by giving the word responsibility is misused, I think, or is misunderstood because it feels like, oh, I'm responsible, but it's the ability to respond. It's like, again, reframing the word in itself. It's like when we're given the ability to respond, that's our choice, how we respond, then it changes the whole energy of what that's about. And again, it gives us more of a freedom, or we're liberated from the default or the automatic, as human beings, we feel victimized. And when we move into this other consciousness, then it changes the way we look at life in general, and it's not, there's things that I can't understand. I mean, exactly why things are happening. They just seem horrible. But if a part of me holds on to there's a higher purpose for all of this, I'm not quite so drawn into it as but there's a part of me that's kind of the observer still, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, you're right. It's very sensitive, and we never want to ever minimize our pain or someone else's pain and say,
Mm-mm.
oh, that's all just a growth experience.
No.
Because that loses what that is doing for the person. But
Mm-hmm.
giving them, I love that new way of reframing responsibility. Instead of being burdensome, it's your pathway to freedom. When you just say, yes, I own this, I take responsibility for it. It will also completely change the way we think about our transits, progressions too, but staying with the transit, so many people, and I've talked to other speakers on the show, it's like people who don't work on this level or just starting to come around to it, they still freak out, about a Saturn transit coming their way, or Uranus, and they think that they are powerless, and that these forces are going to come in and crush them as if it's a war. But from this
Yeah.
perspective, when you talk to people, how do you help them not just tolerate, but like really embrace and find all the opportunities in these even so-called hard transits?
Yeah. Many years ago, well, I shouldn't say many years ago, maybe about 6 years ago or so, I started doing work with a group called the Stargate Experience. And I was in, it was a small group, and that I was teaching an astrology class at the time. And the channel said, call in the planets that you work with. And so when I called them in, I was overcome with love. It's just, I could feel so much love from the planets. And I felt love for them. I had never thought about I love the planets, but it was mutual because everything's connected, right? So it's like this whole sense of, oh my gosh, there's so much love. And I mean, I was crying. It was just so profound. And then he said, go and visit them. And I thought, like in a rocket ship. I mean, I was like, what? But my consciousness just started to expand. And I could feel each planet. They're all vibrate at a different frequency. And I could feel each one. And I got far out. And I got Pluto. And then I kept going. And I became aware I was a teeny little speck called Linda. But I was also part of everything. And that totally changed the way I looked at the transits, because I believe that the planets do love us. They want the best for us. And as astrologers, we know, like Saturn's a taskmaster, right? And he wants certain things. And so you negotiate. You look and you see Saturn's coming to my ascendant, or Saturn's coming here. So what's going on and you work with it. You know, you know it's going to win. I mean, you know, it's because it's for our highest good. The reason we have these transits, or this is my belief, and so that instead of resisting, which is the natural thing to do, because it's like nobody likes to change, you know, but we don't grow if we don't change. And so instead of going, no, I don't want to do this, it's kind of like you just kind of say, okay, it's Saturn. I know what you want, Saturn, you know, and he's going to hit this part of my chart. So this is the part I know that it needs to be, you know, is in a growth spurt, I call it, you know, and so we just move with the energy. It's like you pay attention to the little taps. You don't have to get slapped on the head, you know, because you kind of go, okay, yeah, this is what this is about. And so you kind of, just like I had Saturn recently cross my ascendant, and it's like, okay, so I made a chiropractor appointment, I made a dentist appointment,
Perfect.
you know, just move with it. And I had this one little thing going on that I know it'll go away once it gets out of orb, but it's just kind of, it's like, you know, that it's asking you to pay certain attention to certain things. And so you take advantage of that. And that's one of the hugest gifts of astrology, is we know who's talking to us and what they want us to do. And to, like, if it's Pluto, you don't really have a clue. You just kind of surrender. It's like, okay,
Oh
you
yeah.
know, I always tell my clients, you know, look at the glyph. It's a head with two arms. Like, I give up, you know, but it's like, I give up, but not from I give up, I can't, poor me. It's I give up because I know that I'm being transformed into something bigger, something better in some ways, you know. So instead of fighting you just kind of, and it's not, I mean, I make it sound so simplistic, but it's not that easy, but it's easier than fighting it. So does that
Yeah,
make
and it,
sense?
it makes so much sense. You know, I'm in the throes of a big Pluto transit right now, and surrender literally is my approach to it, because sometimes even when we think we have the self-awareness, guilty here, we realize we're still acting out of these old patterns, which are the very things that Pluto, for instance, wants to help us face. So
Mhm.
what does it do? It comes in, creates in our human sense of things, these challenging situations. And so our, probably for many of us, our first response is going to be to act the way we always act. I'm going to be tougher, harder, stronger, dig in more. And it's like, wait, I think that's exactly the wrong way. That's just going to prolong it, intensify it, whatever. Instead
Mhm.
of just saying, you are Pluto, I am a mere mortal. Let's see what's here. I will surrender. I mean, we don't do stupid things, you know, we don't do anything that would harm ourselves, but we just go in with like a curiosity, right?
Right. Is an excitement, because it's like, ooh, transformation, you know? it, I know it sounds really crazy, but we know people who've gone through Pluto transits without, you know, horrible things happening, and we also know people who've gone through, like, so I don't know how many times we've heard where people, you know, get some horrible disease, life-threatening disease, or they get in a terrible car accident and they're in the hospital for months, and then later they'll say that was the best thing that ever happened to me. But if that can be Pluto, if you're not paying attention, if you're saying no, then Pluto's going to just, I kind of say, it's going to pick you up and put you over here. If you're not on the right path, then you're going to get put over here, and it can feel really, really uncomfortable. But if you're kind of going, oh, wrong path, you know, okay, do you want me to hear? You know, and you kind of make your adjustments, it doesn't have to be totally traumatically terrible, you know. But I think my old self probably would have been in the same place, but because I experienced the planets and I feel like you can talk with them and negotiate with them, then it doesn't have to be. If you look at it as this is a growth opportunity, I call it, you know.
Well, I mean, Pluto is kind of a different example because it is so slow moving, and when we have them, we're
Big.
only going to get it once. I mean, in its back and forth retrograde cycle,
Right.
you know, a year, maybe up to 2 years. But some of the planets that are going to keep coming back around, and of course I think about Saturn because it's got those kind of neat four quarters, right? The first square, the opposition, the closing square. It's what's so exciting about them is when we become aware of it, we know that, oh, I'm in a time where I can start to look at something and begin to make the adjustments now, because I know that this will be the next one, right? Because sometimes when seemingly, let's just say, quote unquote, catastrophic things happen, and we go, that came out of the blue. But when we really look at the history there, we go, well, I guess I had a warning. I guess I had an opportunity, but I was too busy. I was in denial. It didn't seem, and we let it go. And then those planets that love us so much just kind of shrug and go, oh man, you're really going to make me do this. I tried, I tried to invite you, and now it's going to have to be a little bit more forceful.
Yeah. I often, well, the way I like to look at astrology is that the chart is like your committee members. These are, I like to introduce people to every part of their committee, because we have different parts of ourselves, and so if you understand who they are, what their job is, how they're predisposed, where they're sitting at the conference table. I usually take a chart and say, put it down like this and imagine it's a round conference table. And this is where your committee members are sitting. And so, notice that this Uranus guy over here is all by himself, and just to kind of get a sense of how we're already predisposed, how we're made in a way. And then it helps us to be able to understand when the transits come along, and to see who are my allies, who can I count on, who do I have to negotiate with, and I like to kind of personify the chart so that people get a sense of it, again, energetically, and they can understand it, not just from conceptualizing it, but just to feel the energy of a Pisces Mars or something, to see, okay, so how does this one act, and how can we help it? How can that one help this particular situation? Anyway.
Well, this just goes to so many things that you're sharing with us today. One of them being not just to be left brain academic about it. So when something comes up, they don't just like quickly scroll through their memorized notes or that little encyclopedia, that little, Google inside of their own brain that's just like searching for those keywords, but to have it be more of a living and integrated relationship, whether it's through the energies of the archetypes of the planets or the suggested meanings of the transits, the opportunities. And I love what you were saying before, like about that little play acting with music and style and color and imagery. You also have, and I don't know if this is like the perfect moment to share it, Linda, but you shared with me the coolest chart, archetypal chart, that is a visual representation in a very different way that can help people get some of those really basic fundamental things that we do need to. We need to learn one way or another, left brain, right brain, somewhere in the middle. Is this a good moment to share it? And you give us.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Yeah, and this is just kind of something that popped into my mind, and because I'm very visual, so I wanted to make something that was an at a glance, where people could look at something and just kind of get the different elements, modalities, and the flavor of the different houses. And so I got a hit to cut out pictures of different architectural styles. And then my partner is very gifted at sketching, so he sketched them out for me. And so we can just, if you just visually see that the cardinal houses are toward the middle, the fixed houses are in the middle of the chart, and then the mutables are on the outside. And just to get a flavor or a feeling for each one, like a Capricorn or the 10th house is a southern mansion, very traditional and so forth. The 9th house has a Italian villa. type of thing. The 12th house is a Victorian, an old Victorian. Um, just I like to have a sense of these different things so that we can feel it, not just say, okay, 10th house, Capricorn house, about tradition and da da da. And so, anyway, there's a little story that goes with each of these things, but also there's just little, well, these things on the outside. This is not uh, unusual just to have the different colors. But just if somebody is visual like I am, they can look at this and say, okay, so Mars rules Aries, this is glyph for Aries. You know, it's cardinal because it's close, it's fire because it's got a red door and fire coming out of the chimney, that kind of thing. And so that's how I love to teach and love to talk about astrology, not just from the left brain or just from a list of adjectives, but to really kind of feel it. Yeah, so I'm in the process of doing a book, um, personifying the different characters and calling it a children's astrology book for adults.
Oh my
to
gosh, how fun is that?
Just to kind of get the energy of these different things, because there's so much astrology online now. It's really wonderful. It's like so rich. But sometimes I'm finding that people are not learning the basics, getting a solid foundation. You know, they're learning about some asteroid or a dwarf planet before they really get the foundation. And so that's where I feel that's important to me, to help people to get a sense of the basics, not just memorizing keywords, but just to feel it, you might say. Yeah.
And we've talked about a few of the planets in particular. Is there anybody? You see, I think of them. I definitely personify them all too.
Uh-huh.
And I do that kind of now, maybe unpolitically correct. I use gender pronouns. I mean, to me, Venus is just, sorry, it's a she. Could
Mm-hmm.
be, she could be a cross-dressing Venus, but it's still it's still
It's
gonna be
feminine
that.
energy.
It's
Yeah.
gonna be a feminine, whether that means women and girls, or just a kind of yin, receptive, creative approach to life, which of course we love when men have that. I mean, we wouldn't want to exclude anybody from that, but I do feel them so personally. And I just wonder, because I love the way that you bring this, again, very, I just keep saying like integrative, but it is so real. Um, you draw from so many areas of life to enliven the astrology, and then the way you talk about astrology just kind of enriches the rest of our lives, right? It's that two-way thing. What other planets, do you have a few things that, because I just feel like people would really enjoy hearing your take on whatever, Venus, Mars, maybe Jupiter.
Well, it's what just popped in was last year, I think, when Mars was moving into Aries, and everybody was like, "Oh my God," for good reason. It's like, oh, but before he went into Aries, he actually spent quite a bit of time with Neptune, and zero Aries, I'm an eternal optimist, but I just thought it's kind of like the little bully kid in a sense, talking to the spiritual elder who's kind of giving advice to Mars and saying, I know that pretty soon you're going to be, where school's out and you're going to get to go out in the playground and play and yada, 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 and just kind of to feel, I don't know, it feels like it's more of an integration of how things are orchestrated, and we're not isolated incidences, that they, just like the nodes, the nodes in 2020 when the pandemic started, we were in Cancer North Node, Capricorn South. And so the Cancer, it's kind of like the universe said, you go home, you go to your room and you think about what you've done. And it's, in a way, I mean, the universe sent everybody home, literally, it's like, and you think about what you've done. And I don't think, I mean, I know I myself am not the same person I was before the lockdown and who I am now, because I did think about what my life was about and what I was doing, how I was spending my time and money and so forth. And then Gemini came along in the Gemini North Node and the Sag South. And it was like re-examining our beliefs and what do we think about how we're doing life? How do we spend our time and our money and our resources, and what are we doing to our Mother Earth and so forth? And then now, we're in the Taurus Scorpio. And I think the Taurus part to me is that we're learning to embody the fullness of who we are, that we're not, the standard thing we've all heard is we're spiritual beings having a human experience. Well, now through many things going on in the expansion consciousness work is that we're doing workshops like going into the void, into the beyond, into the silence, into the, and we're actually experiencing this other higher octave of ourselves, you might say, that our 3D body is this, but we're waking up to that we're so much more than just this body. And that I think, this is my take on it, I think that this Taurus, this North Node in Taurus, is teaching us to not only appreciate the vessel that we're in, but to also to expand ourselves, to embody the whole of who we are, not just the Linda part of me, but the whole spiritual part of me, the bigger part of me that that we're getting in touch with, that we're now through meditation and different things experiencing, the wholeness, the spiritual being that we really are, in a sense. Yeah, I know that sounds really out there.
Not in the
Aquarius
least.
rising, so
I don't think so. I feel like there are trends. I mean, there are always the avant-garde. There's always people that are going to be embracing these things long before they're popular, when they're considered, kind of kooky or whatever. And then it starts to come into the mainstream, and suddenly everybody is doing like ascension training and reaching into multidimensionality and finding lineages that go beyond our beloved Earth. And I think that less and less it's sounding kooky, and it's sounding more, well, of course, I mean, how can we think out of an infinite universe, multiverse, that there's one place that life and consciousness exists? I mean, that sounds a little kooky.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. Yeah, thank you. And it is, I think we are reaching or getting close to critical mass, where we will awaken to a different reality, in a sense. And who knows, that maybe, when Pluto moves into Aquarius, or, who knows exactly when it's going to happen, but I think we're trending that way.
Yeah. Well, that's why it's just so much fun to just keep paying attention and, watching and seeing the evolution out there, but remembering that's all us individually feeding that collective, right? And so instead of going, well, what difference does it make if I do this, if I recycle, if I meditate, if I cut a corner? And it's like, there is no collective without each individual's contribution.
Right. We all live in a quantum field. We all live in the field. And so by us doing our own work and raising our frequency, and I think by doing the Scorpio work, the trauma work, and letting go of these lower frequencies, the shame, blame, guilt stuff, then we naturally buoy up. This is how I picture it, that we buoy up because it's love, right? That's what the energy is. And so that when we do this as individuals, we are contributing that to the field. So yeah, it's
I love that. And I just thank you so much for what you are putting into the field.
Well, thank you. I mean, I try. I'm not perfect by any means, but I try.
No, it's wonderful. And I really seriously could just listen and have this conversation with you all day, and we can't. But before we let you go, there's actually a couple things, free things that you want to share with the audience, and one is your own individual gift.
Oh, yes. Last year, I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, I did something with this group called Being Happy or something like that. It was not an astrology.
The Simply Happy Women.
Simply Happy Women. Thank you. There we go. Yeah, it was strange. She said she found me on the internet. I thought anyway. But I did I think it's almost 60 minutes. And it was trusting your inner knowing through the lens of astrology. So I think it's good for people who are relatively new to astrology, but I think even for veterans, it just gives a little bit of different take on how we look at astrology, maybe to help make it easier to communicate with people, non-astrologers, what astrology is about and how we can learn to trust our deeper selves. Yeah.
No, that sounds great. And, I think any good astrologer would always be humble enough to say, not only that there's new things to learn, but just new ways to look at things, right? Just keep opening up those different perspectives, that's what's enriching.
Yeah, astrology that's where I'm saying it's so exciting because there's always more to learn.
Always.
Every day I learn something more, This is, we all have our own perspective and bring in a different piece. Yeah.
And there's another thing that you're involved with that's free and that's being sponsored through the Astrology Hub that you wanted to tell people about.
Oh, right. And I'm not, just to clarify, I'm not a regular on the Astrology Hub. I've been invited back. So this is my second time as a guide. But the Astrology Hub is offering a panel it's a forecast for the rest of the year. And I think it's not exactly set, but I think it's going to be on June 16th. So, and it's free. And there'll be 6 or 7 of us, I think, on the panel. And then I'm guiding the Cancer Moon series. So it'll follow right after that. So, yeah.
Well, when all that is firmed up, I mean, it's no secret, we're obviously talking before this thing airs. And it sounds like it's still getting firmed up by the Astrology Hub. And by the time people are listening to this, it will be. And the information for it will be right here on your page. So we are bringing the future to the present.
Right. Yeah. And I don't know, Suzanne, if it'd be okay, because I started doing haiku for astrology.
Yes, I love your astrological.
What I wanted to bring into is that I think that astrology is becoming more and more accepted by mainstream. And so sometimes, I don't always do this, but for full or new moons or some big thing like this recent eclipse, then I just post some of these on Facebook, and I'm surprised at who responds to them. And so again, trying to catch the energy of astrology without talking, then I started doing haiku, which is a Japanese form of poetry. It's 5 syllables, 7 syllables, and then 5 syllables. So I just thought maybe we could end with a few of those.
Oh, please do.
Oh, thank you. So I wrote one for the Jupiter. Well, I wrote several for the Jupiter Neptune conjunction, but we're crossing a bridge. This conjunction lights our way. Faith in the unknown. So just kind of capturing what that was about. And then for this recent eclipse is life is evolving. Watch for synchronicities. Listen with your heart. Saturn squares the nodes, collective consciousness shifts, let go of the past. What brings happiness? Attitude of gratitude. Illuminate love. And we'll close with, on this special day, this could be any day, but this was that day. On this special day, anything is possible. Relax, trust, allow.
Oh,
That's it.
it's so beautiful. And part of what I love about haiku is you don't have to say, oh, I'm into poetry, I'm not into poetry. It's just like, it's so simple, and it's just really about all of the feelings and associations. Through its simplicity, it allows the listener to draw it in and make it part of their own experience, or bring their experience into what's being conveyed. Very special.
Well, thank you. I'm starting to love doing it. I'm still brand, amateur. But my point is that astrology is such a wonderful gift, and that wherever we can share it, in whatever way we can share it, I think is important at this time. Yeah.
Well, that is just probably the most perfect way to end a talk like this. It's always, astrology is always a gift, and probably never more than right now. So thank you again for your contribution into the field. It was so great to have this talk with you today, Linda.
Yeah, and thank you for all you're doing too. Yeah. Yeah.
And for people that do want to know more about you and the work you're doing, and haiku, and all the different ways that you give back to the world, they can visit your website from the link that's right here on this page. And of course, download that video. That sounds incredible. So, and to the audience, thank you for tuning in and taking this stuff to heart, because that's where it all changes, when we really do that inner alchemy, right? Not just hear it and then next, really take it in. And of course, I invite everybody to tune in to the rest of the interviews on the Secret of Master Astrologer Summit, because everyone it's just beautiful in its own unique way. So thank you, Linda. And
thank you. Thank you so much, Suzanne.
And bye, everybody. We'll see you next time.